Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant, and we're glad to be back with you this week. This has been quite a crazy week, and we're actually recording this a little bit earlier than normal because we're traveling to two different places. And the coolest thing about that, I was thinking about this today, like we're squeezing this in to a little bit of time that we have, actually before we do a couple of marriage coaching sessions. And, you know, I think that it's really important when you and your spouse you have a purpose, you believe in something, you're doing something together, and you're both excited about it, no matter how, I mean, I don't want to even say inconvenient. Taxing, yes. This is hard, but like neither one. I mean, we talked today, you know, a little bit ago, and we were like, hey, let's try to get this squeezed in, and we were both fine with it. Even though I think if one or both of us was not excited about this, we'd just be like, oh, we don't have time. But it's important, and our listeners are really, really important. So thank you for that. And we're glad to be sharing with you again today. All right, so we got to jump into this topic, and we're going to get to sort of an end point where there's going to, I guess, be more of a tips, suggestions, whatever, like why stay together.
Right.
No matter what your situation is in marriage, and of course, our story is infidelity. So we're going to speak from that background, but no matter what your struggle is, what you've gone through, this is what we want to get to at the end, is we want to get to why should we even stay together? Like, what is the goal in that? But the reason why this came up, I asked you a really interesting question last night, something that I've never even really thought about a whole lot, but I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on it. And so we talk to lots of different couples, and they come from all different backgrounds. Some of them are believers in the Christian faith, like we are. Some of them are just very marginal Christians, like all over the spectrum. Some are devastated by what might have happened in their relationship because of their belief system. But then there's some that really don't have a belief system, and they're just married, and they're trying to figure out, well, how do we survive something devastating that's happened to us? So the question I asked you last night, and I didn't necessarily have an answer, but I loved your answer. So that's why we're actually talking about it today. So the question that I asked you was if you thought that it was actually easier in some cases for people that were not believers or Christ followers or some sort of faith, some sort of a faith background, if it was easier for them, and maybe even statistically, I wonder if more of them stay together after something like infidelity than those who are Christ followers, believe the Bible, follow. And I had reasons for asking that, because my line of thinking was, these people that don't really have a faith background, they're married and they're living, as a married couple, but they don't have this faith-backed moral compass. Now there's good people.
That's right.
And I do believe that so many of them, like, they know something's not right about, having an affair or being with somebody that's not your spouse. However, there's a lot of those people too that there's open relationships and, that kind of stuff, that because they don't have the same set of guidelines that somebody that might be a Christ follower would have. And so I thought, well, is it easier for those people to kind of just brush it aside and be like, well, you screwed up, and I mean, I screw up, and heck, I may do the same thing one day, and, who knows? And I'm not downplaying those people at all and their commitment to marriage.
Right.
I just was raising the question because on the flip side of that, I think about how difficult it is on one hand because we can sit here and we can say, how did we could have never made this without our faith and without our faith background and our belief in Jesus and what, that part of our lives. But at the same time, maybe that's what makes it harder sometimes because there's this set of beliefs that we believe, and even biblically, where you can justify and say, well, I mean, you crossed a line. You crossed a biblical line. And so I've got every right to leave. And so I asked you that question because I was like, does it make it harder for people that are Christ followers as opposed to those that really don't have any faith background and they're just kind of like, yeah, let's stay together. It's just easier that way. And your answer was amazing, and I loved it.
Oh, great!
So
I'll never say it again.
So tell your answer.
Well, before I say my answer, I want to tell you, and you probably don't know this. I remember specifically where we were, like waiting to turn left on County Line Road. Specifically, know where we were when you said to me, and it was early after I confessed to having an affair. It was really early. You said to me, like, I think all the time, how could you have done this? Because we are Christians and you know the rule, not the rule, you know the standard that we're supposed to live by. And then you said, I mean, there's people all over that don't even have a faith in God and don't even believe in God and don't have these moral standards, and they stay married and don't have an affair.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, that was hard for me because I was like, yeah, I mean, at that point it was still like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, I didn't have an answer for it, but that's the same type thing, like you would think it would be easier for somebody that didn't have the standards that we have as Christians because of the 10 Commandments, and it tells us, that we're not to commit adultery. You would think that would make it harder for us to step out and step over the boundaries of marriage. But I mean, it would make that harder for us to do.
Yeah, because I remember, like, now that you're bringing this up, I just remember thinking through all of that and going, there's people out there that they don't adhere to this Christian faith like us, and they're just good people.
Right.
And they just know that that's not right.
That's right.
Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I thought, how could you, or how could anybody, that really is, professing to follow Christ and his teachings and all of that, how does that happen when other people that don't even,
And of course, we've talked through a lot of stuff between 12 years ago, because like I said, that was definitely in the first month of us processing, if not the first few weeks of us processing. And we've come a long way since that. But the question you raised to me last night, I answered pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, let me ponder this and see what other people say. It was pretty straightforward what I believed, because I felt like you were saying when you asked me that you thought it would be easier for people to stay together that were married because we, have this covenant relationship that we have said before each other and before God that we're going to stay together. And I do believe that is true, that we want to honor that covenant. But I also think that's really dangerous because we are honoring a covenant without our hearts being really ready to stay in our marriage and make it good. So then I compared that to the people who don't have, who it's just a piece of paper or a license of marriage, where it's not necessarily a covenant before God in their eyes.
It's a contract. And
Yeah.
in most cases, I mean, let's give the benefit of the doubt too that it's a commitment. Like
Sure.
they're making a commitment
That's right.
to someone.
Yeah, a commitment. I like that. But for somebody who has made a commitment, but yet they don't think biblically about it being a covenant before the Lord and to each other before the Lord. If they don't have that, then I think it's easier for them mentally to say, okay, well, it didn't work, and we're just gonna
break the contract.
break the contract, and just say, they didn't honor their commitment, so I'm out, and they don't have to worry about that covenant relationship. But when they choose to stay, they're doing it because they want to make their marriage work. Where I think believers who are very firm in their faith and trying to follow biblical principle, then they're choosing to stay because they're in a covenant relationship and they know it's, quote, wrong to leave, but their heart is not in it and to make it. It's not a choice because they want to. It's a choice because they have to.
I think that's so good. All of that was perfectly said. Let's do this. Let's maybe talk through. Let's just say that I have a feeling that a lot of people that listen to us, they are believers, no matter where they are on the spectrum. Not everybody, but there's a lot of them because that's what we teach, and that's what we're promoting and talking about, and just how our story intertwines with our faith. But for somebody out there that's either gone through infidelity or something else that's been some sort of a marriage crisis, and they're electing to stay together, let's throw out some reasons why people stay together, especially believers. So I'm talking about believers because you've already talked about the person that's a non-believer. That they may stay for some of these same reasons,
Sure.
but for the most part, they're like, "Hey, I want to try to make this work because we're compatible. We made a commitment to each other. Let's see if we can make this work." But for a believer, there is, first of all, like you said, there's this covenant, and there's this, I made a commitment before God, and I don't want to break that. But I think there's other reasons that people stick around too.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think one for both would be children.
Absolutely.
And I think that's believers and non. You want to stick around for your children.
How about this? I thought about this today. I think a lot of people, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am. I think that some couples that are a part of a faith family will stick together because of their reputation inside of the faith family.
Sure.
Most people,
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, and most people would never know what's happened because people don't talk about it. But they have decided, one person got caught or one person confessed, and it's a mess. But they're like, "Hey, we're a part of this church, or we're a part of this faith family, and we can't ruin our reputation by splitting up." So we're just gonna.
And I think that that's the case, even if there's not infidelity involved. I think that if people are just tossing around,
Yes,
I don't love you
100%.
anymore or whatever, they're not gonna go and get a divorce because of what it would look like.
Yeah.
I think that for sure.
I think that some of it too is, and this kind of plays into the covenant, but I do think that Bible believing Christians, they have these strong convictions. There's verses that we pull out of the Bible that says God hates divorce, and we hold on to that, and we say, well, if he hates divorce, then I'm not going to do it,
Right.
And so they stick around because of a conviction, something, strong like that.
Or guilt. Like they're afraid that they would just live forever in shame and guilt if they, chose to do that.
But I do think that also, and this is a great reason to stay together, is that because of their background of faith, there is some belief in a hope that there's a God that can do a miracle.
That's right. That's big enough.
Yes, because we see those stories and we believe them from the Bible, and we've seen, just like, I mean, if God can raise the dead,
Sure.
then he can certainly raise a marriage.
That's right. Well, and not only that, but look at the people he uses in the Bible. Like when you look at the character, I mean, he uses crazy people like us.
Oh, yeah.
People who, I mean, even like we could name some, but I mean, even the one that comes to mind so much for me is David.
Absolutely.
I mean, he calls him a man after God's own heart, but yet David, I mean,
What a mess.
what a mess. And so,
Adultery, and then had the husband of murdered.
Yeah.
And that's not the only stuff, but those are the big ones. And, so, I mean, obviously we can relate to that so much. And then to see that he is literally called by God, a man after God's own heart. Right.
And so if you know the Bible at all, and these stories, and if you spend any time under a teacher or preacher, then you have learned that he uses that even those people, like even though we're a mess. And so you kind of have that hope in the back of your mind that he's big enough for even your problem and the problems in your marriage.
I think about that a lot because we get a chance to work with a lot of couples. We're doing a lot of marriage coaching right now, which is so incredibly life-giving to us.
It is.
And, and then you just have those random emails or messages where people, literally their words are your story and your podcast and, have made such a difference in my marriage, have changed my, all that. And I just stop and I go, this is insane.
Yeah. Well, and it's not our story.
No, but it's just crazy to know that, I mean, what a screw up,
Right.
that and our marriage was literally falling apart. But from that, it's like God just resurrected a marriage, and not only that, but he was like, let's go help other people.
That's right.
And
That's
I'm
right.
like, and it is just like the people in the Bible.
Do you ever think back and go, what if you hadn't stayed? Like, I've said it before. I still get just, even our podcast picture, if you hadn't heard me say that, I love the cover of our podcast because it's Rusty leading us so well, but then I'm just kind of following along giddy behind him, just still thankful that he stayed. And I think sometimes, maybe I think about it more because I'm the one that, messed up. But I just think about, what if he had not stayed? Like, what if you chose to leave? What if you had listened to the dozen, I'm just going to say dozen, not dozens, because I think dozen just were brave enough to voice it to you. But there were probably dozens of people that thought, what in the world? I mean, I'd be gone. Like, why is he staying? And, when I think if you had listened to any of those people, this is why I'm so passionate about it being God's story, not ours. Because he put it on your heart to stay because he knew the bigger picture. He knew where we were going and where the lives that he was going to be able to touch through us. And I think that's just powerful.
Well, I do think about it all the time, actually. And really the reason why I think about it all the time is because this is the whole point of this episode. It's not, diving into these questions and what we were, tossing around kind of for fun yesterday, when it just was something that came up. But it's more of, and here's the meat. This is where we wanted to go today, and you just teed it up. But where we want to go today is, I do think about that all the time, because if I had not made the choice to stay, then there's no way that I would be experiencing the joy of marriage that I have today. And what happens is when these people, is going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, these people that are, sticking around because of a covenant, or, I mean, those are great. Sometimes you just need a reason. We've said
That's
that
right.
before. Sometimes
Sure.
you just need a reason to stay. And if it's your kids, if it's the covenant, if it's, your reputation in the church, I mean, I hope it's not that,
Yeah.
but if it is, a strong conviction, great. Sometimes you just need a starting point.
That's right.
But
And it's a decision. That starting point is a decision.
that's right. And that's what can put you on the path. But what tends to happen is, and I believe this is what happens to a lot of Christian marriages, they just stick around because they feel like they have to and need to, but it's a lifeless marriage.
right.
And so what we're trying to say every time we talk to you guys, and especially today, is we just want to answer the question, why should we even stay together? And we are saying to stay together for all of those reasons because they're valid, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is that we know that God can completely transform your marriage. And so, yes, when I think, what if I had not chosen that? Well, I would never know the fruit and the benefit and the joy that we experience now. And so the whole reason why we do this is so people can have hope. And people, and yes, there's marriages out there that are great, and they love, they listen to us because we've been through so much stuff that we can tell just tips about marriage, and they come to us for, how do we make our marriage better? Like, what should y'all have done to not be in the position, all of that. But most people come to us because they're like, whatever y'all have, like, how do you get there? And you get there first by committing to stay together. And for some reason, I feel like we have to say this every time. There are people out there that cannot stay with their spouse, and you've already had to leave them for various reasons. And we would never tell someone to stay in an abusive relationship, addicted relationship, the adulterer that, is just habitual and will not repent. Like those, we get it. But we're talking about when two people decide, and they may be really far on the spectrum of deciding.
Right.
That was my air quotes that nobody can see.
But you have to say quote, quote.
Quote, quote. They may be on, they may be far apart where one of them's all in and the other one's like, maybe I'll stick this out. But once that decision is made, we want the decision to be made because you can look ahead and go, okay, there is hope. God can transform any marriage and make it better than it was before whatever happened to you.
Yep.
And in our case, I would even say let's just say a year before you started making terrible decisions that led to infidelity, I think we had an okay marriage. I mean, I was never unhappy in our marriage, even up to the day that you confessed. Looking back, hindsight's 20/20. There's all kinds of things that I can, red flags and stuff now. But even that time before everything came out, our marriage today is like astronomically better than it was then. And I don't believe that you have to go through an affair to have a marriage ours.
That's right.
But there are people out there that are going through something terrible or have gone through an affair, and you're like, I am just sticking this out, but this is a lifeless, going nowhere marriage. And we're just trying to tell you it does not have to be that way.
That's right. That's right. Can we talk next week about ways to make sure that you bring life back to your marriage and how to ask God to do that for you? I'm just kind of claiming a topic.
Yeah.
Because, it's one thing to say, you don't have to have a lifeless marriage, but I can hear somebody in their car right now going, okay, Well, then tell me
Yeah,
how to
what
get
do
it.
I do?
What do I do? Like, because I know that it's a decision, and I talk a lot about making decisions and steps and obedience.
Yeah.
But then feelings coming alongside because you're stepping in obedience and honoring Christ in your decisions. And so I don't want to leave people hanging with choose to
Right.
stay together and and don't settle for a lifeless marriage. Like, it can be better. It can be full. It can be better than anything you've ever known. But we need, and I don't want to say step 1, step 2, step 3.
Right.
But here are some things you can do.
That's right.
To
because
make
that's
it
what
better.
That's what I mean, and that's where our heart is. Our heart is coaching
That's
people.
right.
And in our coaching, that's what we're doing, is we're showing you how to move forward.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, we don't ever want to get on here and just talk about a topic and then never give you any
Right.
real ways. But
Right.
but I mean, if you're listening and you just need the one takeaway is that God can transform your marriage. Your marriage can be better tomorrow, the next day, 5 years into the future than it ever has been before, and that's why we don't want you to give up on it. All right, so couple things really quick. The big one is if you are interested in marriage coaching and you want some information, please reach out to us, because I'm telling you, I wish that we could do every single person that contacts us, but we're running out of time. Running out of space. Yeah. There's not enough time in our day to do all of the marriage coaching we want to do. So if it's something you're interested in, please reach out. Now, there's also, once we finish up our 5 weeks with someone, then things will open up a little bit. So it's okay to reach out, and we're going to do our best to get.
And if not, we can do a waiting list.
Oh yeah. So we are very passionate about that, and we want an opportunity to work with as many couples as we can. And big thing on the podcast is, man, just tell some friends. Like, that's what we're finding. We've been coaching some people recently, multiples, that have said, we found you because somebody told us about you. And like, these people, their whole marriages, they're being changed. And it might be just because somebody like you that's not having a problem, you just know of a friend that needs to hear some hope. So don't be afraid to reach out and tell them, give us a try, listen to some of the stuff. There are like 125 of these episodes. So if you can't find anything that you're dealing with, then I don't know what else to tell you. But we are more than honored that you have chosen to spend 30 minutes a week with us. And we're going to keep doing this as long as God tells us to. And we're excited to be a part of your life and your marriage. So we'll see you guys next week.